Live. All right, all right. I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm alive. Hey, YouTube fam. I just wanted to come back at you. Wanted to end February since today, March 1st, on the one book that I've been reading that I completed called If. So if you have not got your copy, definitely is worthwhile getting this copy of this book. And so I folded pages back so that way I can stay on track on just what I want to share with you that was actually shared with me through this author who has been writing books for a while now. This is just one of his books. So what I'm going to touch on is the last part of his book, just some highlighted points that I want to touch on for the last two sections of his book. So I'll start where folded pages. Try to be 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes. Hopefully I can keep it to that. But yeah, just wanted to share this with you all. And then also the books to come that we'll be sharing on YouTube with this video series of personal development. So again, this is your girl Ray Leezy coming from the personal development corner of Ray Leezy. So the third part of this book that he goes into on an if, it actually touches on the what if possibilities that God gives us. And one of the things that he touches on to open up that section, it says dreams are created twice. The first creation is spiritual, the second creation is physical. But they always start with what if. What if you knew you couldn't fail? What would you do? We've all heard that saying. I know I have. What if time or money weren't an object? What God-sized goal would you go after? If you're looking for an excuse, you'll always find one. The same is true of opportunity. And if you can't find one, you can make one. Maybe it's time to quit asking why and say, why not? So that's how he opens up the chapter, which is very powerful. So, one of the chapters that I want to touch on, just some highlighted points, and it's about 3 to 4 chapters for this section that I do want to touch on that just really spoke to me and share some insight on just different things for me and where I am with my season of growing and giving and living. So the first chapter I'm gonna touch on is called the Who If chapter, and it's chapter 15. And he just touches on some things about, when we're dreaming, to have, an idea is great. You can have thousands of those, but he mentions he rather have, one God idea versus 1,000 good ideas. So he also touches on, we were all created by the mind of the Almighty God. And if you think of that, and God only has good ideas, we are the physical manifestation of God's eternal plans and purposes. So simply put, we are God's what ifs that He's created. And just as God has created us, we are obligated that we should be called to create as well. Um, so one of the other things on this page, talking about the one God idea, is he said God ordained dream is beyond your ability to pull off. So meaning that it's not just going to be left up to us to pull off a God ordained dream, because if it's God ordained, then God will give us the provision and the tools and resources and people to make sure that dream is fulfilled. So that's one of the biggest things that I like from this chapter. And then the last thing from this chapter I will touch on is he says, you may not influence millions of people, but you may influence one person who influences millions. That touched or spoke volumes for me. I don't know about you, but we all, from time to time want to make sure we make an impact. Far as the people in my circle and people that I, network with, that we want to make an impact on as many people as possible. But it's something very different to hear that perspective of it may not be a million people, but you don't know who you've touched through one person that can touch those million people that you were looking for that seed to, of course, grow and to flourish and to bloom and to, grow beyond its means. May not be where you see it, but other lives may be touched just because of your act of obedience and just you fulfilling that dream God has given you. So don't ever doubt the impact that you do or influence you have on, individuals, is what the author is pretty much saying. So, because you never know how they are influenced by you, and then in turn can influence other people, maybe more than the number of people you've influenced alone. So that's from that chapter. So the next chapter I want to touch on is chapter 19, talks about out of your league. This one was powerful. Because there's a lot of things that we get that we don't deserve, and there's a lot of things that we do that we don't get that we probably should, get. So that's going based off of, a little bit about grace and mercy when I'm talking about those things. But Out of Your League talks and opens up with the scripture Romans 8:27 says, "The Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God." So I'm not talking about getting things out of your league that is not, you know, in the will of God. We're talking about in the will of God. So one of those things he touches on in this chapter is saying, your dream may seem like it's a million miles away. I know sometimes mine feel like that. The more dreams and visions that God gives me on a daily basis of the season I'm in just seems like, wow, when am I going to accomplish this? However, it may be feeling like it's years away, miles away, or even maybe a lot of money away from you accomplishing it. But he says, don't despise the day of small beginnings. If you do little things like they're big things, someday God will do big things like they're little things. So, in other words, don't underestimate what God has put into your hands, but just be able to multiply what God has given you and to reproduce and do the things that God has called you to do with what He's given you, and not despise what you don't have. Because you never know when that day will come when those things that were small to you, of course, in God's eyes, it's always big. So He can treat those things as if they're big things. Once you look at it as, hey, this is something small, but it could be so much bigger for the next person that you're blessing or that you blessed. Also, it says our prayers are limited by our lack of knowledge. We don't know what we don't know. That's why I trust His intercession more than my intuition. That's also why I often preface my prayers with a preamble. He says, "Lord, I want what you want more than what I want." And that's, I know, something I probably know I need to put that in there a couple of times in my prayers, because the Lord be knowing. Also, he talks about how he journals. That's another big thing that I'm, working on doing more of, so that way I can start implementing that as something that to teach people more of learning how to journal throughout their life, because that's really a legacy that we leave for our generations beyond us, if you think about it. Whether it's, journaling through a YouTube blog or Facebook lives, or, actually old style journaling where you're writing in a book, and or several notebooks. We sometimes get away from that because of technology, but I would say however you decide to journal, that's something you want to leave behind to others to remember you by, and so that they can learn things that maybe they don't have to necessarily go through. So that's one of the reasons he does that. He says, so at the end of the year, his annual ritual is to reread every journal entry. That's something I know I want to get into, because it's a lot of things I take notes on, and I learn by taking notes. So I learn twice as much if I'm writing the notes in that particular event or activity versus if I'm just listening. So that's how I learn. I know everybody learns differently, but that's one of the things he talks about, and that's something I'm going to implement myself, is rereading every journal entry, towards the end of the year. And then he says, few exercises are more meaningful. It screams God is faithful, but it connects the dots between the prayers asked and the prayers answered. And it resurfaces some of the lessons God has taught me throughout the year. So that's a good time for reflection. So building that in your schedule, if that's something you do want to do, of when it comes to reflecting what you've already been brought through and what you've learned. Another chapter that I'm gonna touch on after this is just two chapters for this last section. Then the last section we'll go into. But this one says the kingdom of unintended consequences. So it says, simply put, the outcome of our actions have unintended consequences that are beyond our ability to control, beyond our ability to predict. Those unforeseen consequences fall into three categories. Favorite number. On the positive side of the ledger, there are added bonuses called unexpected benefits. On the negative side, there are unexpected drawbacks, like the side effect of a medicine that cures a condition while causing complications. And finally, there are perverse results. This is when your original intention bites you in the back, or another word, however you want to take it, tomato, tomato. But those are three things that it's talking about when it comes to this chapter about unintended consequences. One of the things he gave as an analogy is like when you think about playing a chess, which I don't know how to play. Sometimes you have to take a step back in the game of chess in order to step forward, lose a piece in order to gain a piece. So it says, you don't want your plan to succeed if God has a better one. So that one was like, wow, never thought of it that way. Especially if, God does have something better for me, then I'll take that any day over what I'm planning. So that's sometimes how you have to look at things when it's considered setbacks that you're looking at, or maybe disappointments. It may be something else that God has in store for you that's even better. So it says, when you plant your seed of faith, you never know where it will branch or who it will bless. That's the exponential nature of faith. God uses our seeds of faith to accomplish things we didn't even set out to do. A lot of things, that we do because we see how we want the outcome to be. It could go way beyond that, is what the author is saying. Because a lot of times with, what we do intentionally and initially of what we look to see the results of, we don't see those other things that are going to come from that being accomplished to say, hey, it did this and this and this, but I wasn't really expecting that. Reason why I went after this or accomplish this is because I thought, I just wanted this to do this, outcome or present this outcome. But it's a lot better when unexpected benefits, of course, come from our faith and the things that we sow for God's kingdom. So that's a good one that he touches on in this chapter. The last thing he says, quit focusing on the outcome. The increase is God's responsibility. Our job is planting and watering seeds of faith. And if we sow mustard seeds of faith, God will turn those what ifs into 1,000 unexpected benefits. So the last question it ends for the chapter. What if you sowed a seed at your point of need? So I liked how it ended that chapter for sure. And then the last section I want to touch on, or chapter in this section, is called monogrammed blessings. So with this one, it opens with Romans 8:32, said, he who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? So you have to think or take that in consideration. Think of it again. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also, along with him, graciously give us all things? Romans 8:32. So in this chapter, he's touching on blessings. Of course, so hence the title, monogram blessings. But he goes a little further with it outside of what you expect him to touch on. It's just saying the blessings of God will complicate your life. Just as sin complicates our lives in negative ways, the blessings of God complicate our lives in positive ways. So it's just like an ultimatum. Would you rather want more blessings or the sin to continue to duplicate in your life, far as in negative ways? I know I want, of course, the first. So he also touches in this chapter, God doesn't bless us so we can raise our standard of living, which a lot of people, even me, have thought of, oh, if I have more money, I can do this, this, and this. Yes, it's to have more options and to be able to do more for our families and whoever it is that, loved ones or significant other, husband, kids. However, it's not to say, let's just raise our standard of living, but God blesses us so we can raise our standard of giving. The greatest blessing of a blessing is the ability to bless others because of it. And so when I thought of it, I was like, that's really different. So when he touches on it, flip the blessing, he touches on a couple of different things of how that can be done. So if you're thinking about how someone has blessed you in your life, how about when you get to that position that God takes you to, because he will, then you can do the same for someone else, that maybe have been in your position before or similar. And that's really what it means called flip the blessing. Where have you been blessed? Was it someone provided you a vacation that you didn't expect? That's a blessing. Did, the landlord, I don't know, say, hey, we're not going to charge you a late fee. And you deserve the late fee because you were late with the rent. That's a blessing. So it's just little things you could think of, or big things, medium sized things, whatever it is, A lot of things that we do or have access to on a daily basis and not even expected are blessings in itself. So that's some of the things he talks about in this last chapter of this section. And he just says, again, what if you increase your standard of giving instead of your standard of living? And I'm sorry I'm going a little long. I know I said 10, 12 minutes. I can be one long-winded, but that's why I have certain pages folded so I don't go off task. But this last section I want to touch on, excuse me, is a section that ends the book. And so we'll be touching on some other books moving forward, called The Fourth If. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I had to circle this little part that he had in here that was at the bottom of the page because it just really stuck out. If you see how kind of could see how it's circled, it looked like a little rock. With me circling this whole paragraph pretty much. It says, if you're looking for an excuse, you'll always find one. The same is for true of opportunity. God ordained opportunities are all around you all the time. Of course, many of them come disguised as problems. Despite what the old adage says, opportunity doesn't knock. Sometimes you have to ask for it, seek it, and knock on it. But don't seek opportunity first and foremost. Seek God. If you do, opportunity will seek you. So just remember that. Um, One of the chapters that I really liked, I'm only touching on two in this last section, is called The Corner Man. And just really goes into depth about how, not just God is in our corner, but Jesus Christ is, because of God sent him to, atone for our sins and really be the conqueror over death and defeat it. And so he goes into that in another chapter, but that's not what I'm touching on in this one. This one starts off with Romans 8:34. It says, Christ Jesus, who died, more than that, was raised to life, is at the right hand of God and is also interceding, for us. So one of the things he touches on is a couple of books he's read that just really opened his eyes and helped him with growing, when it came to learning and studying more about this chapter that he's touching on about our corner man. So he touches on, let me find it, where he's saying, if you don't hold out on God, God won't hold out on you. So that's another, perspective or phrase you could look at throughout the, just your life in this year period for 2019 of, why hold out on God if I don't want him to hold out on me? And that's the biggest thing I took away from this chapter. And of course, just how he touches on how everybody has somebody in their corner who is successful. When you think about the story he brought up, Muhammad Ali, he had somebody in his corner named Angelo Dundee. We don't always hear those who are successful or have significant impact. They always have a team. So that's a clue there. You need to have a team in your corner. And ultimately, the team that's the ultimate team is the corner man, Jesus Christ himself. Because with him, no one can defeat you if you continue to keep him in your corner in the center of your heart. So he touches on that about the Holy Spirit and some different things that he touches in that chapter. But of course, you should get the book so you can read it. And then it just says at the end of that chapter, what if you approach every person, every situation, every challenge as if Christ were in your corner? I mean, I understand what he's saying and getting at, and I know I could approach some things very differently. Have If I keep in mind who's in my corner, and that's what he's getting at with that particular chapter. So the last chapter to close out the book. No, so sad, but I'm actually probably going to start a study on this book with groups of people, and just pass this book on also to those who I see the need to get something from it. I plan on doing that. I want to continue to carry that on like my line sister did before she passed. This is a book she was passing on to people, and it's a powerful book, so I want to continue to pass it on to others and pay it forward as well. So I plan on ordering some more of these books and mailing them off accordingly. Last chapter is called Keep Calm and Carry On. We hear that phrase all the time. It's on shirts, posters, books, bookmarks, you name it. It's just a catchy phrase that a lot of people like to use or hear or see nowadays, with the keep calm. But that's the last chapter he puts in here for a reason. And one of them being, he touches on big dreams require deep convictions. The heights of your accomplishments will never exceed the depth of your convictions. He even teaches on Nothing wrong with core values. We all have them, but convictions go a little deeper, if you want to say, than core values. So he says, if you, one of the mantras are, if you stay humble and stay hungry, there's nothing God cannot do through you. Convictions, he said, are written with blood, sweat, and tears. Convictions are lessons learned from experiences we never want to go through again. However, we wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. So I know I have a lot of those situations or seasons that I've been through that I'm like, oh, Lord, I learned a lot, but I ain't trying to go through that again. But I'm not going to give away what I gained from it. And so I would never trade it in for anything, as far as just going through that situation. It says sometimes God leads us to a place where we have nowhere to turn but Him. And quite frankly, I know this has been my, I won't say roughest season, but the season most that I've seen God probably in some years. Just for myself, not just for others or the situations I'm in, but just to really get to know Him more. I can truly attest to that statement that he's mentioned. He will put us between a rock and the Red Sea, is what that section is in that he delves in. And he says, which I'm adopting this, I have stopped categorizing things as good and bad. Why? Because all things work together for good. That's my conviction. I'm not saying they are good when they happen, but there is nothing that God cannot redeem and recycle for his purposes. And sometimes it's the bad things that actually turn out to be the best things that have happened to me. And I can attest to that too, with a lot of things that have transpired, especially with the book that I'm writing. Um, if I hadn't gone through those things, I couldn't write this book that I'm actually in the midst of writing and getting done by my birthday, in November. So a lot of things that we think is good may not be, and a lot of things we think are bad can actually be disguised to actually help us where we need to go, where God is taking us in, Him, as well as in life. So with that, this was the last part that I wanted to touch on in the If book. So I'm glad you all tuned in with me and stuck it out with me for these last 3 videos. But we're going to move on to another book for the month of March. So there are some other books I was reading in February that I might preface and give some highlights about. But the other book that we're going to be touching on shortly, this was a book from February as well. It's called Talent is Never Enough. Some people who follow me on Facebook see my quotes from this book and other books that I read on a daily, but I thought I would start expanding and doing YouTube videos in regards to what I'm learning, so that you can learn as well and get the book and read it and take it for what you can get it for, as far as the nuggets from it. So this is one of my favorite authors, John C. Maxwell. I have plenty of his books in my library. I know a lot of other entrepreneurs and networkers at heart that love this gentleman. Was privileged to actually get to meet him. So this will be the next book I'll be highlighting, as far as doing a series on. As far as Talent is Never Enough. Each series will be a little different from the one you've seen before. It won't be the same. So I may not have a long series on each book, or a set of videos, but just know that this is the next book that we're going to be touching on that I did read in February. Some of the books that I'm reading in March will be one that's with my book club that we have at our church. For the women, we're going to be reading The Shack, which actually shout out to my other line sister who put me on that book. I have not finished it, but now I will, since it's an assignment that we've gotten from First Lady. So that's one of the books in March. The other one I'm reading, because of our convention we're actually going on in the end of March to Dallas, is of course, our guest speaker is going to be Mr. Damon Johns. So I'll actually be reading his book called The Power of Broke. That wasn't his last book, but one of his books. So that's going to be my second book that I'm reading in March. And then the other one I'm finishing up, which is not going to take me the whole book month of March, is called 30 Ways in 30 Days. And that's something I've been implementing and changing my ritual of how I start my day based off this book, which is by one of my business partners and mentors, Steve Million. So I haven't picked the third book yet, because I'm not counting that one as the third one, because that was from February. But the third book, I will be letting you all know of that one soon. And so, yeah, stay tuned. And again, yes, I've went over for about 10-15 minutes past than what I wanted to, but hope this has really touched you or blessed you in some way of what I shared with you all today. And then hopefully I see you all on the next video. All right, look alive, look alive. It's 2019, y'all. Take care and God bless.